Welcome to the God is Not an Asshole podcast. If you are one of the many people done with religious dogmatism, hang on. You might sense transcendence, but your church or other faith community never seem to get off the ground. You realize that honoring your conscience means more than fitting in and keeping hard to explain rules? Hang on. You could probably think of the goodness in your tradition, and you tried your best to save that baby, but there's so much bathwater. Join your hosts, David Norman Moore Jr. in California and Carrie Connolly in New Jersey, who are collaborating to bring on guests who have found life on the other side of fundamentalism. Guests with stories of how they have liberated themselves from beliefs that divide us from each other. None of our guests' narratives are identical, but we hope you'll find something in common with each of them. We invite you to experience our common bond as we all inspire even more of us to embrace the true self.
Wow. Well, welcome back, everybody. We are here with Mac James, PhD, who is a former fundamentalist Christian who left the church in his late teens and spent the next several years searching for a way to connect with the world around him. This led to him becoming a Buddhist in the late 90s and later a meditation teacher. His current interests lie in decolonization, equity, and diversity, with a particular focus around the Indigenous and rainbow communities. He currently lives on a small farm in New Zealand with his wife, son, 2 chickens, 2 pigs, and 1 mad dog. And you talked to us before, Mac, about leaving the private Christian school and going for the first time to a public school at the age of 15. And you made me think of, you know, I had 2 kids in that school, in the Christian school at that time, very young. They were younger than you.
Yeah, David and Charity?
Charity and David. Yeah.
Yep.
So we took them out of that school much earlier. So, you know, my heart goes out to you, but I think she was maybe in 2nd grade and he was in 1st grade or something like that when we took them out, or maybe 3rd and 2nd. And we didn't realize what was going on. But, you know, to this day, Charity it's like they began to blossom, you know. I mean, they changed as kids. And we're talking, you know, where we live. I mean, the demographic is 1.5% African American. So they daily still dealt with anti-Blackness, but anti-Blackness in the public school was so much better than in the Christian school.
Wow.
Oh my.
So go ahead and tell us about your experience.
Well, I mean, just to kind of sort of just finish a little bit on, so from the last episode, I think going back to Gordon Weber, not only did he create this strange juxtaposition in my mind between a Christian and a Zen Buddhist falling in love, getting married, being and raising kids together, building a life, having a family, and doing it, you know, well enough to be that successful. And that was just a foreign thing to me. But he also he started dropping things in, like, and he did it. He was really cool about it. He did it all in an historical context. But he started dropping little bits of Buddhism in there. But he wasn't indoctrinating us. He was just kind of going like, well, at this time, in history. And so he'd set it up all quite well. And he said, I want to make it clear to you, I'm not trying to convert you to Buddhism. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to teach you about history. So
that's refreshing in and of itself.
Yeah. And this was 1988, 89, somewhere in there.
Wow.
So, So I started writing down these sayings of Confucius, these sayings of the Buddha, and in my little journal, and that I don't remember, I kept it, but I'd stash it away. And those sayings were really important to me for a long time. Again, it was something I held on to, and it was another So yet another pivot moment. And we have a lot of those moments, especially as developing children. But, that's another moment that I really kind of, it was like another brick through my window and going, oh, wait, there's something more here and I'm not getting it. It's all outside of me. And I need to get out that, I need to get at that knowledge. I need to get out what's going on there. And so, yeah.
I'm curious. I'm curious about something.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have you retained any special thing, any scripture from the Christian scriptures that are special in that same way? Is there anything there that you find redeemable?
Oh, certainly. I think at this point it's really important to introduce. I went to Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles, so it's a Catholic institution. I had the sorry, it's really early, and I might get a bit teary. Yeah, I met a guy named Father Bill Fulco. He changed my life, absolutely changed my life. He died, I guess, about almost 2 years ago, if not maybe 2 years ago. And I can't think of another man who's taught me more than he did. But what happened when I was at Loyola, to kind of tuck into your question, is I also studied I studied archaeology with Bill, and also theology. And so you have to take you have to do a year of theology at Loyola. And so at first I was like, oh hell, this is gonna suck. I'm not here for this. Blah blah blah. But it's like, mate, you're at a Jesuit university. And then when you get in, you realize these are some of the most subversive guys I've ever met. And then it really helped me to kind of go, okay, we're here in the moment. I'm going to dig into this. And so I can't. It's fun. The thing around the Bible is it's kind of funny. I'll remember things chapter and verse here and there, and then I think what probably came out of that experience was I was already a practicing Buddhist by this point. And so first off, the whole experience actually I felt made me a better Buddhist. And I think how that happened is that I was able to start to see Christ's message differently. And it was getting in and looking at analysis and talking to theologians, talking to people who I really respected, talking to people who were not in a, I was an older student, so I was in a different position than, a lot of my peers. I curated the museum there, so I was more like a colleague. And so we're having these really intense discussions, and and I think also seeing, oh God, I don't want to qualify it like this, but I lack other words. Healthy faith, if you will, a faith that embraces so much. And it was, I think, Bill, who really, for the first time, coming from a man, learning about unconditional love. And that lesson took me years and years to learn. Like, again, it was a seed planting thing. And one day he and I were talking, and he said, "You and I love differently." And I was like, "What?" He said, "We do." He said, "We love differently." He said, "Your love is a very grasping love. When you love someone, you really try to hold on to them." And he said, and he's very insightful about it. And then he said, "But I love you for who you are right here, right now." And I'm paraphrasing very much. And this conversation was many years ago. And so I was like, okay, and I didn't get it. But I held on to the conversation, and I'd kind of keep coming back to it. And I would say that the penny didn't fully drop until my son was born. And I was just like, because my goal with my son, before I ever knew that he was, different from a, social perspective or framework perspective, it was that my goal was to love and accept him moment to moment to moment, every day of his life, and just be as present as I possibly could. And it was Bill it was Bill who gave me that, or he gave me the tools, and then allowed me to pick up this tool so that I could empower myself. And
see, Mac, you're pulling up this Western idea of tabula rasa, where we are somehow informed to think that we're supposed to dump a bunch of information into our kids rather than see them as our teachers, and to realize that they come to us really fully formed in ways that maybe we aren't. Can you say something about that?
My son is my first Zen teacher. He said to me, your son will be your greatest master. And that is true. He shows me, it's that mirror image. He just shows me over and over and over again. The biggest, I've made some doozies, some stupid mistakes in my life, but the ones that affect me the most now are the ones that I've made as a parent. They rip me in half.
Yep.
But I value those moments as much as they hurt me. I value them because that was a pivot moment. That was like, okay, your parents are now coming out of your mouth, buddy. So you got to get in and sort that out. Peel back those layers, dig deep. And he's kept me digging. He's kept me digging and looking at myself. And I can't recommend therapy and some form of practice, whether it's Zen practice or Judeo-Christian practice or Islamic practice, whatever practice you need that appeals to you, therapy and being a parent, because you're going to face things about, hopefully, I hope that people are facing things about themselves and integrating that wisdom, integrating those lessons, and providing that example for your child. Because that's what I started to get. This kid has got to watch me deal with my BS, unpack my baggage, because that's the only way he's going to learn this as a kid, is by watching me do it and me being open with him about it.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because it was being a parent and the ferocious love that I felt for my parents that got me to stick up to God, right? To stick up to the God and to stand up to the God that I had been force-fed, because there was no way that I was going to allow anyone to tell my kids that they were less than. And that was before I knew whether any of my kids were going to, who they were going to be, that one of them was going to be gay. Even the thought that somebody could make them feel less than brought out, honestly, it was a little terrifying. The emotion of protectiveness that I felt, and it was the ferocity that I felt around that. And it made me say, no, God, that is not the God that I want anywhere near my kids.
Carrie, you reminded me of a conversation you and I had where I got outed for being inclusive with LGBTQ plus people denominationally, and I got called into the presiding bishop's office. And after that meeting, my son was driving me to the Santa Barbara airport, my son David, and I told him what I was experiencing in that moment. And he looked at me while I was driving and said, "Dad, I'm so proud of you." And then about 20 seconds later, he actually pulled over on the side of the road and said, "Dad, I'm so proud of you." I would rather have that than all of the structural approval in the world.
Yes, 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's huge. Exactly. It's better than any PhD. It's like a top
Right?
marks
Yeah.
PhD. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think to kind of add into that, particularly what you're saying, Carrie, around that ferociousness. When I went to, my son goes to a Catholic school here, and he went to we put him in a school that got highly recommended. He ended up being severely bullied, and this is before his he started to transition, and but he's different. He's got a bit of a speech delay, and he's also got something called auditory processing disorder. So, which, if, for those who don't know, means that he can hear what you're saying, but if he's in a crowded room, he cannot differentiate, and filter all the sounds out.
My son has the same. My son has that.
Distant high five.
Yes.
When they got that mic and those hearing aids, I was just in tears, like totally. Yeah, I'm not even going to pretend. But
I
know. So when we get to we get him to this Catholic school again, came highly recommended. Talked to the principal, everything's cruising along, and eventually, he starts, he starts saying, "Hey, I'm a boy," and so as soon as I heard that, I was like, "Okay, you've got my attention." And so luckily, I've got enough background and an education to sort of sit there and monitor things and watch how it played out and just support him all the way through. So to fast forward a little bit, so at home, outside of school, he's living his life. At home, he's living his life out in the world, so, but every morning he's got to get up, put that school uniform on, and it's something that he does not identify with, and it's tearing him apart. When you see a small child depressed, clearly depressed, it's shattering. And knowing what that's like, as a child, being a child who dealt with depression, I was like, okay, I've got to do something. I've got to. So I talked to my wife. We decided we were going to meet with the principal, and so I went to make an appointment. I went to make an appointment to see the principal, and I got called into the office right there. The secretary goes, "Oh, she'll see you now," and I was like, "What?" And it's the principal. It's deer in the headlights. The next thing I know, I was out in the office, but all of a sudden I was like, "No, we're here. This is you're in parent mode, guns blazing. Put those 6 guns out on the table, man. We're gonna fry this goose." And so,
yes.
Anyway, so I explained the situation to her, and I expect to be met with intolerance. I created a lot of structures that just weren't there, and luckily I didn't overplay my hands or anything. I tried to be as amicable as I could in the meeting. She then just said, "Okay, so where do we go from here?" And I could have just doubled over and wept, like, because of the and so when she relayed to me not too long ago, when she talked to the priest, about my son, and that he would be transitioning and this is all going to be done within the church and the school, he said, "Well, that's great. God created him perfectly. So he just needs to be who he is." And so that level of acceptance I never expected from the Catholic Church at all. And
no, I have chills.
Another
I
insight,
have chills. Like that's yeah.
If they had been Jesuits, maybe, but I think for me, Catholicism has always been there in my life in context. My mom converted from Catholicism to fundamentalist Christianity, but as a Latino, you're Catholic, right? It's very few of us who aren't at least baptized. I'm baptized Catholic. Right. That's actually how my son was able to get into the school. So I play the Catholic Mac, card when I need to.
You're gonna want to check out our podcast with Kat Armas, Cuban American, started out in Catholicism, moved into evangelicalism, almost as, I don't know, like her grandmother and mother really didn't understand, and thought she'd find freedom in the evangelical world, and had to put on the brakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's called, the name of the book is Abuelita Faith.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Actually, I did. I'll make sure I check that episode out, because I did see that. I was reading everybody's bios before I wrote mine. So,
well, nobody's bio is like yours.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that, because that's what I was going for. But all that to say, I think that as parents, like, that, just connecting with what you had been saying, Carrie, around that ferocity, I was ready to storm the place, but it wasn't necessary, luckily, in that situation. Instead, I was met with unconditional love.
That's amazing. And it's so mind-blowing. And I think it reminds me to not always, make the assumptions that I make out of a defensive posture from my own religious trauma, and it's really interesting. And so I'm curious, the title of the podcast, and I try to ask this every time. I try to remember to ask this every time, or something like this every time we talk to a guest. I don't always do it, but the title of this podcast is God is not an asshole, right? And I think that very often the guests that we're talking to have at some point experienced a God who is an asshole, or at least a God that was presented as an asshole, and that's why it takes some work to get, like, in seminary. I had a teacher who, she said, she was met with a group of students who were very concerned that it seemed that a lot of the people that were in seminary lost their faith as part of the process of going through seminary. And she was like, because the deconstruction can be such a painful process, especially when you come in with so much certainty. I'm so certain about this. And so she said something that was so powerful. She said, well, when you deconstruct, when you get to the end where it's all a big mess, you have to keep going. She's like, you have to keep going and rebuild something else. And so what I've heard from you is that you have found something like that in Buddhism, and that you did say that there was some redemption found in the subversive nature of your theology studies in school. And so where do you land now, as far as the question of, is God an asshole or not? Or
there is I know, I'm sorry, I don't remember where I originally got this idea. It's not full of my own. I twisted it over the years. But when I was helping to lead a group, and I was giving a Dharma talk. This is back in the UK, and I said that because we had a lot of practicing people who were practicing CAV who were in the group. And I said, so, the beauty of this practice in connection with your Christianity is that you get to let go of your constructs of God. And then they kind of looked at me a bit funny. And I said,
hallelujah.
Okay, so imagine this. Imagine this. I said, so one day you get a knock at the door, and you go to answer it. And the person standing there says, oh, hi, I'm God. Do you want to hang out? And so you grab this picture you have on your wall that's meant to be a picture of God. Sorry, you're not God. This is God. Put your picture up and you close the door. So if we let go of this construct of what we think God is, I feel as though I wish we had another name. I wish we had another, we could say something other than God. Because what I feel in myself, and I try to relate to my son, extends far beyond that. And I can't, it's a concept for me that's beyond words. I mean, there's a reason why Native ancestors used the terms that they did. The great mystery, you know, there's a reason for that, because that's what it is. It's a mystery. So I guess for me, I can't define things or put them into any sort of category. And it probably stems from the fact that I don't want to, because I already tried that and it didn't work out very well.
Yeah.
Because I was taught to try it and it didn't work out very well. So like, you know, I guess everything, I guess I feel it in that everything is alive. Everything has value and purpose. We're all, you know, we all experience suffering, to go back to Buddhism, I suppose, in that way. But that's just a human fact. So I don't know. I think for me, I kind of look at, in context to sort of an interfaith sort of thing, I'm looking for connective tissue. I'm looking for connective tissue, whether it's different schools of Buddhism, whether it's different faiths. And I think that the older I get, the more I'm seeing the connective tissue and the less I see the difference. You know, I know it's there, of course, and that diversity is important to acknowledge. But I think when we're meeting from the heart, then all that connective tissue is right there for us. And
okay, so
that's what's important to me.
Now that you bring that up, and of course we know that, I mean, there's no evidence that Jesus identified as a Buddhist, but could you see Jesus as a Buddhist?
If we I forgot the name of the author who did that book recently. You probably both know off the top of your heads. He did the verses of Jesus, the gospel, you know, where he's singling out what Jesus most likely actually said.
Was that
kind of akin to Thomas Jefferson's book? No, he might have said something.
No.
I think he was a theologian or historian. I'll find the name of the book. I'll send it to you guys. I've got a copy of it somewhere. But when we get down to the core we get past the construct of Jesus that is designed in the Bible to help keep us in line and to scare us a bit, because we've got that juxtaposition in the Bible, don't we, between this really, really loving human being who's ready to lay it all down for us. And then on the other side, you've got this authoritarian who's, you know, you get yourselves together, because, you know, and it doesn't. So I sort of veer towards, I'm interested in that loving guy because I think that's all he was. Yeah. And I think to connect with what you're saying, David, for me, the key aspect of practice, or what, it's not the goal at all, a byproduct. There we go. The byproduct of any practice should be compassion and unconditional love. If we don't have those two things, then we need to go back and look at our practice. And I think at the core of where Christ sat. Well, if I shoot you, I need to shoot you with unconditional love, right?
Yes.
So you've challenged my thinking a little bit, and you've pointed out something that I realize that I'm doing, that I have done. When you talk about the constructs that we build for God, you know, and that really God is this mystery, I have noticed in my own self that I was so truly harmed. And I think many of our constructs come out of trauma, right? And I was truly harmed by the patriarchal versions of God, right? White patriarchal versions, but patriarchal versions of God, that now I cringe anytime I hear God referred to as a he. Right. So I either need a gender neutral, or I prefer the divine feminine. Right. And I realized that when you were saying, you know, deep mystery rather than divine feminine, like I need to perhaps re-expand my thinking of God past that divine feminine that was so healing for me. Right. But because I'm also realizing that all that I'm doing is I'm transferring anger onto the masculine, right? That I have, and I need, that's some work that I need to point back at myself and heal in, right? just the idea of the constructs that we put on God, right? And how do we get back to the unconditional love? How do we get back to that unconditional love?
Carrie, you're making me think of, there's that popular song Chris Tomlin wrote, Good Father.
Yeah, that one.
But you know what? The thing is, I love that song.
Me too.
But every time I listen to it, I'm hoping that not everybody loves it because if you're not thinking more broadly that God is more than a good father, but has the best father qualities, that we can, hold on to. But God's a good mother and a sister and brother and so many other things.
And non-binary parents.
And non-binary, exactly.
All those things, Yes. And I realize, like, you're challenging my thinking because you're making me go, oh, okay, what constructs have I put around God to make God more on my side, right? Mm-hmm. As my defense and my guardian against the traumas that have been inflicted upon me. And then also, how can I recognize when that's at play in other people and view that with compassion rather than whatever human response I might have,
To me, that's if and again, to further this kind of going back to what I was saying before in context to when I was sort of teaching that bit, it's that our constructs are getting in the way to the point where we're never going to fully know. Even if I walk in with a construct of you, Carrie, into a conversation, oh, Carrie's this woman I met online, and and that's who you are. I won't get to know the real you at all. And chances are, really, right. I'll never know the real you. But maybe I'll have I'll get lucky and have an insight. And I think this model, you can apply it again and again and again in all of your relationships. And I look at my past relationships, whether friendships, romantic, whatever, and I'll go back and go, man, you were so uptight, Mac. All those constructs actually destroyed those relationships. The fact is, I don't ever want to say to my son, like, I know you and you are this, in the sense of to box him in. And I had that done to me, and we're sure we've all experienced it to some extent from our parents.
Yep.
Hopefully it's not true, but and I'm just like, man, because again, it's that same concept. We love moment to moment to moment to moment, and that's a continuous job. I really screw that up sometimes. I really screw it up, but you get right back on the horse, acknowledge how you screwed up, and you keep moving on, and that's, I think that's important. And so if one seeks a relationship with God, then that's going to have to be applied as well. Just keep getting on.
I posted on Instagram last week, love is always curious.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that was really good.
I mean, once I've got you defined and nailed down, it's not love. It's a power play.
Yeah, because now I have expectations of you, and when you stop living up to them, then you're in the doghouse, right? Yeah.
Yeah, precisely. Stuff. It's not your responsibility to live up to my construct, And when I started to realize that in my marriage, when I started to realize that in my marriage, it was like somebody just got a giant king salmon that had been dead for quite some time and slapped me across the face with it. As hard as they could. And I was just like, oh, you complete and utter fool. What are you doing? And that these things kind of come through therapy, but I was just like, no, it's not her responsibility to meet these needs that I say, well, it's a part of marriage. You're supposed to do, no, wait a minute. You're your own responsibility. Wow. And it doesn't mean we're not a family. It doesn't mean we're not a community. It doesn't mean that we're not there for each other. So I'm not trying to preach any sort of Randian philosophy here, but more so around just take responsibility and wipe your own backside.
Mac, this This is, first of all, this is the longest conversation we've had yet.
Yes, we need to.
Longest
I'm
interview.
sorry.
And
No,
I
it's
mean,
good.
it's so good that I was thinking this is what they mean when you're watching a talk show on television and they say, go to our website after this is over because the conversation goes on. And I kind of have that feeling right now, like we could just keep going. And, we've taken a lot of your morning, and I'm hoping that, we will have an open invitation to bring you back, and talk more.
I'd love to come back. I was hesitant in certain ways, because these are things that, especially in context to, my Christian experience, I talked to in sort of closed circles. I was talking to my little sister, Querida, about this whole thing. And she was so encouraging. And she just said, you go and you tell your truth. And so I was like, yeah, this is actually a little bit cathartic, isn't it? So we're all getting some. So anything I said, if anything I said, though, goes to help someone else's experience or provide some sort of insight into their own trauma or experience, then awesome.
So now that you bring this up, do you think that any of your siblings would be interested in sharing with us?
Well, maybe Querida. I would say that she's got a particular journey in context to Christianity. And, I have other siblings who are still practicing fundamentalist Christianity. So
yes, I know you actually sent one couple to me.
Yes, I did.
A few years ago. Yeah.
Yes, I did. It was around the time my son came out. Yeah. So I would say that I don't know. I think she might be. I'll run it by her. Put you guys in contact. But
okay.
Yeah, she's a very wise young woman.
It's been such a pleasure to get to know you. Thank you so much for this time.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
This did not
really
disappoint.
Really enjoyed it.
I've been like all week. I've been thinking, oh, we're gonna have Matt James on here, and I just knew it was gonna be rich.
Oh, thank you both so much. It's really been a pleasure to be here with you and hang out and get to chat.
Awesome.
Our love to your whole family.
And my love to
and
both
especially
yours.
your son.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. As we say here, kakite.
Thank you so much for being here today. We are people who have left behind performance-based religion and the shame that comes with it. Maybe you have a personal liberation story to tell, and we want to know about it. Please contact us on Twitter at GodIsNotAnAsshole or text 805-703-8393 because the world needs to know that God is not an asshole.